You guys want to hear about how wonderful Southern Illinois is, right?
Yeah, we know.
You guys already know? Well, what are you doing here then?
No, we know some.
Some, okay. So I sort of wanted to start this little presentation first introducing myself and how I came to take a project such as this on. My name is Mike Chervinko, and I'm a native. I was born here in Carbondale. Professionally, I'm a nurse over just across the street at the hospital. And I often joke with patients that inmates have no clue what a life sentence is because I was born there and I'm still there. That was my introductory bad joke. Come on, guys. It works with them anyway. So being a nurse can be fairly stressful, and the outdoors can always be viewed as an escape. So I think that's something that in my early 30s sort of coalesced my photography with my love for the outdoors into something that ultimately became this book. It's not clicking.
Let's try it now. No.
Nothing.
Okay.
Technical difficulty for those online, sorry. So first, a little bit about the book background. Go ahead and click to the next. As I sort of just alluded to. It's just taking a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I was born and raised here, and my photography, I've been into it for about 30 years. Starting as a teenager, and I took a wonderful photography course while I was in high school. I probably got the highest grade in the class, and that was probably the highest grade I got in all of high school. I just loved it. And my family, my mom's side of the family is very into photography too, so I guess maybe it's a little bit in my blood. Younger than that, I kind of got into the outdoors, and honestly, some of my fondest memories from childhood were church picnics at Giant City. And that was something that just clung to me and kept me, going outdoors, because we would see bluffs and things like that, and they would just always, I would always be awestruck by them. Go ahead, next. As time went on, in my late teens, early 20s, I got a book called 50 Nature Walks. Maybe some of you guys own a copy of it. And that is honestly when I first learned that petroglyphs existed in Southern Illinois. And, of course, it intrigued me. And in those times, I made a few futile attempts, despite having, decent directions in that book, but could never source them. The next 10 years kind of passed, and my interest in that never completely went away, but I didn't really pursue. I was, starting as a nurse and starting a family and finishing college and blah, blah, blah. Wait. Yeah, next, sorry. So in my 30s, life was kind of stressful. My photography felt like a good outlet for that, to alleviate stress. And getting outdoors also was a good way to alleviate stress. And my interest in finding these petroglyphs sort of resurfaced. That's when I started to become successful. And if anybody here has tried searching for these types of things, it's very hard. There's very little information out there. There's few people who will tell you much about them, and quite a few of the places are on private land. So, you have to talk to property owners and things like that. as I was photographing them and sort of sharing some of my pictures on Facebook, and people would see them, and I even had a couple of photo exhibits as time went on, people started to see this body of work that I was sort of documenting, and some people were like, this is never really been done. Like, people know about some of our petroglyphs, but not to this degree. And over time, people would occasionally suggest I needed to write a book. Okay. The idea always kind of intrigued me, but I never really took it too seriously, at least for now, because I'm working. I didn't really want to take the time, stop and take the time to put the work in to truly write a book and, deal with a publisher and blah, blah, blah. I was never really opposed to it, but, something that I always thought, I can do that when I retire. Well, last winter, I met this fella here on the screen, Mark Leach, and we are very like-minded. He's a wonderful avocational archaeologist, and he has a vested interest in our prehistory and petroglyphs. And I took him to a few sites, and after seeing some of these sites and some of my work, he said, Mike, you need to write a book. And, my stand pat, well, okay, sure, maybe someday. Where he finally got me, I wasn't done yet.
Sorry.
Where he finally got me was with the fact he has published a couple of books, and he offered to help me with this. He told me about something that I had never heard of. Maybe, other people have, but I had never heard of this thing called self-publishing. And he's like, Mike, it's easy. If you give me your photos and your text, I will start putting this together and we'll get it done. Well, when you get an offer like that, how can you say no? So that sort of threw me into this. Moreover, one of my best friends is got his master's in creative writing. He's a published poet. He's a published author. He's done editing with the U of I Press. So I had that side of self-publishing under control too. The next thing that I needed, though, because I'm a photographer, I'm not necessarily the expert on the content in some of my book, so I had to bring on board two of my friends, Mark Motzinger and Steve Bowles. Mark is he lives over kind of near Carrier Mills, and he's a well-known local historian. He spent decades studying our stone forts, and he actually discovered a stone fort, which is a very rare and hard thing to do. I think there are 10, and he found the 11th, which he later had validated by a professor, an archaeology professor from SIU. Steve is a senior research archaeologist with the Illinois State Archaeological Survey. So with these two, Justin and Mark, I now had a team that helped me to create this body of work. This is the cover, the front and the back cover. Effectively, the book consists of about 350 of my photographs, and then a few that were contributed by Steve and a couple other people of just certain items that I wanted to include but just didn't have photos on. And then it's essays, it's facts, it's personal experiences, and sort of the goal of the book is to entertain people and to inspire, and quite frankly, to show that Southern Illinois is a pretty cool place, because it is. What makes Southern Illinois cool, we have tremendous prehistory. We have very interesting history, which there's a little bit of that included in the book. And then, of course, our terrain, our flora, our fauna, the sandstone bluffs are just incredible. It's the meeting point of 6 geophysical areas, and you put all that together and you have enough for probably 3 books. The book is broken into 2 sections. The first section covers the prehistoric wonders that I, have documented and explored. And then the second section focuses more on the natural features present in Southern Illinois. The first chapter, I kind of get into Cahokia, and I start with Cahokia because it was the apex of the Mississippian culture. Its influence here was just tremendous. After the demise of Cahokia, and I might get a little bit ahead of myself here, so I apologize, but after the demise of Cahokia, basically every other major mound center in the East, Midwest, and South was sort of trying to emulate what happened at Cahokia. Chapter 2 kind of deals with some of our other mound centers that can be found scattered around Southern Illinois. They're pretty much from the Ohio all the way, and the Wabash all the way to the Mississippi. Chapter 3 gets into the stone forts, and I should say in these first 3 chapters, that's really where Steve and Mark's expertise shine. Like I said, I'm a photographer. I do have interest in some knowledge in these things, but their words are really what carry in those first 3 chapters. Chapter 4 is where we start to get back into a little bit more where I feel comfortable living and talking, documenting the petroglyphs of Southern Illinois. Chapter 5, I get a little bit even into some of the petroglyphs of Missouri, and the reason I include those is because a lot of the same themes are seen in Southern Illinois, Northern Illinois, Missouri. It's kind of to illustrate how vast their world was. Next, chapter 6, frost flowers. I just kind of touch on this delicate little ethereal splendor that happens to occur to us lucky Southern Illinoisans. And we are also pretty lucky to have waterfalls, especially in the Midwest. Missouri doesn't have many. Indiana doesn't have many. And nestled here in Southern Illinois, we have hundreds of waterfalls, especially after a good rain, as I'm sure some of you guys already know. Chapter 8, we get a little bit into some popular hikes, and that's going to be probably the chapter where people see things they're the most familiar with. Chapter 9, despite being bad now and frowned upon, there is some historic graffiti and other bits of historic art that are worth exploring a little bit. Chapter 10 gets into another interest of mine, which is big trees. I like big and old trees. So photographing them has been kind of a priority of mine, and over the years I've accumulated some pretty good pictures, I hope. Chapter 11, another interest is the flowers, wildflowers that can be found in Southern Illinois, and of course I relish the rare and hard to find ones. Chapter 13 explores flooding a little bit, and I include that just because from a photography standpoint, it creates some very interesting landscapes and situations. Chapter 14, I get a little bit back into some history stuff, and it covers the kaolin pits and Anna pottery. And then chapter 15, we wrap up with a little bit of discussion of our geology with fluorite. All right, so prehistoric wonders. Go ahead. Chapter 1, Cahokia. So Cahokia, as I mentioned earlier, it represented the apex of the Mississippian culture, a mound building culture. It's a city that's located just across the Mississippi River from St. Louis. It is about 6 square miles and originally contained about 120 earthen mounds. One of those mounds, now called Monk's Mound, is actually the largest earthen structure in I think it's north of Mexico. It's over 1,000 feet long, about 800 feet wide, and about 100 feet tall. Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing this angle. Other interesting things about Cahokia: it thrived from 1050 AD to 1250 AD. Estimates suggest a population of about 10,000 to 25,000 residents. And sorry. And as I said before, its relevance to this book is its influence over our region. Go ahead. So here's what Cahokia kind of looks like today. On the left, you have one of the twin mounds, and if you ever have a chance to see Cahokia in the snow, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely beautiful in a blanket of, a fresh blanket of snow. And then on the right is Monk's Mound. Go ahead. Is it thinking?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Missed it. There we go. It's gotten a bit of a delay. That's great. Okay.
Other things that the chapter look at are some of the artifacts and iconography of Cahokia. So on the top left there, you have the Birdman tablet, which was found on the western slopes of Monk's Mound in 1971. And that is actually a image or motif that is also seen here in Southern Illinois, especially in rock art. The next image to the right of it is what's known as a Cahokia-styled double notch point. They're just beautiful small little bird points that are sort of credited to being created at Cahokia during the Mississippian culture. Below it is one of the goddesses that the religious rulers of Cahokia sort of came up with, called the corn god, or the corn goddess. In the palms of her hands are 2 stalks of corn, and she kind of represents the underworld and fertility in kind of a strange juxtaposition of 2 ideas. And then the next picture to the right of it is just an example of some shell beads. These are kind of interesting because it illustrates the trade networks that existed during the Mississippian time, as all of these shells were imported from the Gulf of Mexico. And the raw beads, or the raw shells rather, were imported up, and then they were fashioned into beads once they got to the city. In chapter 2, we deal with some of the mound centers and mounds that are found around Southern Illinois. As I said earlier, these mounds were scattered all over Southern Illinois, and there were hundreds and hundreds more a century ago than there are now, but sadly, farming practices have kind of plowed and smushed most of them. But there still are some good examples out there. Again, these are the types of things that mostly are going to be on private property. So if you ever do want to at least see them, just know that, take some binoculars or a camera with a long lens or something and don't trespass. As it says, they range in age from the ones here in Southern Illinois range in age from the late woodland era to the Mississippian era. Some of these mound centers in their own right were pretty significant centers, and the book kind of gets into some of those, but like I said, that's more Steve's forte, so I leave that to him if he ever joins me to give a talk like this. Okay, you can go ahead to the next. Here's what they look like today. The top one is actually one that you can see along Highway 3 as you're heading northbound towards Chester. Just past the intersection of Highway 151, if you look to your left, you'll see it off in the farmer's field, but it's on private property. The middle picture is of Kincaid mounds. And on this particular trip, when you go there, they have signs posted that you can only go as far as the observation deck. People aren't really allowed to just roam and explore the mounds and the grounds. But if you happen to be able to go when they're giving a tour, then you do get to go up on top of one of the mounds, which is where this shot was taken from. So that was kind of a neat perspective and a neat chance to be able to do that, and got me this nice picture of the two mounds to the north there. The bottom mound is actually the largest mound in Southern Illinois. I couldn't take you there because Mark took me there, and it is over near the Ohio, and it is on some horrible back roads. I had no clue where we were, but it is several hundred feet wide and probably about 50 feet tall when you can see it, because when you're there, you can kind of see through the trees and get an idea of its actual height. I mean, I know in the photo it just kind of looks like a mound of trees, but there's a good sized mound in there. Included in the chapter with the mound centers, I wanted to have some pictures of artifacts specifically found at each site. So, it gives people a little more of an idea of what these things are and what they meant beyond just looking at, what a lot of people sort of see as a big pile of dirt. The fluorite that's actually an earring, was found in the Kincaid mounds. The face to the right was found near that large mound, Boyd's mound, with all the trees on top of it. The statue below it is a fluorite statue that was found at another center in the book called the Ware Mounds. And then the three colorful points were found at yet another site that's in the book. Oh gosh, the name just slipped my mind. Chapter 3 gets into the stone forts. Yeah, and as I said before, there were 11 total. Up until just a few years ago, there were 10, but Mark, one of the contributing authors, actually discovered number 11, which is along Murray Bluff, not too far from Stone Fort, the town, and the Stone Fort. These are quite a unique feature to Southern Illinois. These stone forts, they're mysterious. They're kind of mysterious stone walls that nobody really knows their ultimate purpose. They've even kind of struggled aging them. The best they can tell, they're from the late woodland period. And the only other credited prehistoric stone walls are a couple that are found across the river, the Ohio River in Kentucky. And here's some images of what they look like today. So in prehistoric times, these would have been built up. They speculate they built them into the ground, and above the ground, they would have raised about 6 feet by maybe 6 feet. There is a map of one of these, and I don't even know if it's featured in the book, but one of the stone forts from, I think it's like 1803 or 1811. It was before the New Madrid earthquake, and that picture gives the best indication of what these looked like when they were new. The one to the left there can be found at, that's the one at Murray Bluff that Mark discovered. The one in the middle is Giant City, and the one on the right is at Pounds Hollow. It's worth noting that the one at Giant City has actually been reconstructed. It's not really clear what it looked like before, but when the CCC was developing the area and building everything up for the state park, they saw the stone fort in whatever state it was in at that time and sort of reconstructed it to what it looks like today. But they probably did a pretty good job, hopefully. Chapter 4, Petroglyphs of Southern Illinois. This is usually was the push to get this book, was this body of work. And this is where I personally spent the most time researching, exploring, networking with people. So I sort of consider this my greatest focus to the book. And if I have one small, tiny contribution to the field of archaeology, it would be my photography of these. I've spent, now it's actually about 12 years researching, exploring, and photographing them. There's hundreds of these images that I've photographed, and because of that, I was able to dedicate roughly a third of this book to just the petroglyphs. They're, to me, beautiful works of art, though strictly speaking, the Native Americans don't view them as art. They view them as religious works, and they draw a very distinct line. A lot of these items that we see beautiful, or at least having artistic merit, they're purely functional or ritualistic to those cultures. Despite photographing them, I don't really study them. I don't feel qualified to. So I always like to say, archaeologists study them. I study how to see them. And the ones here in our Shawnee National Forest, you could teach a course on just how to see them at their best. And that is really where I put my effort in. After I would find them, I would spend time studying the conditions, the time of year, and whether I needed to provide artificial light or not to best capture these. It was always my goal to capture them as our prehistoric ancestors did, using natural light only. But in some instances, if they're in a cave or on the north side of a bluff where they never see the sunlight, then you have to, make do with what you have. Several of the sites are thought to have been marked on for over the course of thousands of years, and you can see this through variations at the same site of different motifs or designs, and also the method of manufacture varies from one image to the next at the same site. The age range is probably about 800 years old to up to 5,000 years old, and some of that span can all be at one site, so just kind of an interesting tidbit. As I mentioned earlier, the Birdman tablet, that's a motif that is seen, that was sort of, I don't know if it was invented, but it was definitely popularized in Cahokia. And it is seen here in Southern Illinois as well. So as I just mentioned, photographing them takes dedication. It takes as much dedication as finding them. Typically, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have been to like Piney Creek Ravine or Millstone Bluff. You see, like, you know there's something there and you can kind of make it out. It takes great effort and great interest to have the patience to sit and study and watch. There were times like when I got this next picture of the bird that's actually the cover, that day I spent probably 4 hours there. And that shot took 5 or 6 years to figure out how to get it to where I wanted it. Go ahead. But the fruits of my labor to the left versus just casually passing by to the right makes a difference. And I will tell you, to see it that well, this is actually the time, this would be a perfect day to go. And it lasts the image is of that quality for a total of about 11 minutes in the day. Yeah, and then the sun dips below the hills off to the west, and that takes care of that. Come back the next day if it's nice out.
Now, where was that at?
It's at Millstone Bluff, and that's a public site and it's managed by the state. Anybody, can go and see it.
Almost that good a few times, and then most of the time you go and it's leaf covered or.
Right, or just has shadows, striping across it from the trees. I personally think that a lot of the Native Americans of those times cleared the trees away because they just, nowadays the trees make it, they're one of the biggest obstacles in trying to photograph these things. Here's another example of timing and conditions make the difference. That's the same image. Go ahead. Now, some of this presentation is just for the sake of admiring, because these are beautiful, wonderful things. And these are things that I know not too many people get to see or enjoy. So part of this book is responsibly sharing some of our most magical, wonderful. Yes. Yeah, and they speculate it could be a prehistoric tool called an atlatl that was basically a stick with like an elbow on it that a spear would fit on, and it would give you leverage to give you momentum to penetrate mastodon hide or mammoth hide or whatever. If that's indeed the case, that's a very old image because atlatls phased out thousands of years ago.
Bows came in next.
We also have a very special site here in Southern Illinois that many people, including myself, think was utilized as a winter solstice site. And, what makes this particular spot so fascinating, even compared to other solstice sites seen around the country or world, this one occurs naturally. Most others, the people built it so the sun will line up this perfect way. So, there's no real, it's a construct. If this was indeed used as a solstice site to those people, they made the observation and went, "Oh my God, this is our gods speaking to us. This is a special place." And Steve actually has some pretty incredible personal interpretations of what the light penetrating that crevice really means. Based on his 20 years of experience with their, studying their religions and cultures.
Is that on private property, Mike?
No, that one is on public property. Yep.
Where is it?
Where is it? It's in Southern Illinois.
Where kind of is it?
So it overlooks the Mississippi River.
Okay.
Yeah, so which also probably plays a part in its significance. In addition to carvings, we have pictographs or painted images. These are far rarer in Southern Illinois, though we do have a few sites that are only pictographs and no carvings. Most of them were made with a prehistoric paint now called ochre, and they would make the ochre by getting iron extract from sandstone, crushing it, and mixing it with animal fat. That made a very durable paint that could penetrate deeply into the into our porous sandstone, which has helped them persist for 1,000, 2,000, however many thousand years. Go ahead. Is it thinking?
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know why it's taking such a lag today.
And as I said earlier, sometimes you do have to use artificial light, which is fine. I have nothing really against it. I just really wanted to capture everything that I could as they saw it. And plus, I think artificial light kind of changes the color of things, so it's not quite as accurate a representation. But some images can barely be seen during the day or can't be seen at all. That bird to the left was actually to my knowledge, an undocumented petroglyph at one of the most popular sites in Southern Illinois. An archaeology friend of mine stumbled on it a few years ago. And when he told me about it, I thought, oh, this is something, I've been to this site 50 times and never noticed this. But it made me realize, all right, this is something I need to see at night. There it is. And while I was there on this night photographing it, I discovered 3 more petroglyphs at this same site, only visible at night, and they're in the book. Yeah, and they're pretty good size. They're like pit and groove style, which are usually pretty small petroglyphs, but these, the pit part and then the groove's about like that, but they're that deep. And then, as I love, my Birdman. There's the most typical way he's depicted in Southern Illinois. In this depiction, and he's in the middle there, the cross head is known as a bilobed arrow headdress, and this is just sort of a representation of it. And what it sort of describes is a kill shot while hunting. It's an arrow through between the lungs of a deer or whatever kind of animal. The bulbous bottom would represent the tail. In this depiction, you have to remove the legs, and then the arms are sort of a blend between wings and arms, pointing down. There's right next to this particular carving, there's another depiction of the Birdman in the book, and it's the only one with legs. Every other is this style. All right, petroglyphs across the Mississippi and in Missouri. So as I again mentioned earlier, the pre-contact natives didn't recognize our borders. To them, the great rivers were likely, the borders were this side of the river or that side of the river, but they didn't have states or anything. During Cahokia's peak, its influence was just everywhere and really did sprawl into modern day Missouri. One of the sites featured in this chapter, I've heard archaeologists say they think it's possible that at least some of the images were created by Mississippian teenagers as sort of a rite of passage. And there's actually several kind of phallic images present. But again, like I said before, I include these because I want to show how vast their world was, and how sort of widespread we would, you can find the same motifs and images and things of that nature. And the last bit, I mean, they're just beautiful, so they're going to get in there. So I'm not going to go through reading all this, but this is just kind of illustrating what it takes to see some of these petroglyphs. This is all included in the book, and to sort of summarize it, there's a rock along the banks of the Mississippi River on the Missouri side that a patient told me about probably about 2014. He told me that the waters had to be extraordinarily low or else, for it to be exposed, or else you'd have to have some pretty sophisticated lighting and scuba equipment to find it. So I waited, of course it got all my interest and my excitement going, but it took me 7 or 8 years for the moment where I noticed, well, it was actually my friend who noticed the water level was dropping low enough, and we didn't really have a clear idea of how low it actually needed to be. We just sort of had a rough idea, and we didn't really know exactly where this thing was, and it's about a 90-minute drive from Carbondale. So the fact that the water dropped, we made this trip there, made the harder than expected mile hike from where you can publicly park up the along the shore of the river to get to the spot where it lie, and it happens to be in the middle of a boulder field, so it was a hole-in-one.
Could you have seen it this year?
Absolutely.
With the
Yeah,
tower?
yeah. It could actually still be out right now. I don't know how high the water is at this moment. Then it's probably out. Yeah. After we saw it that first time, we were all excited and all this and that, and I got my pictures, but it was kind of a cloudy day, so I didn't quite get the quality that I wanted. We went another time, again, to be thwarted by clouds. This is something that happens often in Southern Illinois, Midwestern winter days. You set out and it's beautiful blue skies, and by the time you get there, it's complete overcast. But the third time that my friend and I went, we knew the river was up some, but we thought it would be still plenty low for the whole boulder to be out. Well, when we got there, it looked like that. And but the sky was perfect, of course. And it faces Illinois, so you can't see the image itself, the images, until you walk around to the other side of it. That's about 6 or 7 feet into the water, and I rolled my legs up, and this was January 3rd, so it was about 27 degrees out, I think. So when we got there, my heart sank, just absolutely sank. But I had to know if we just wasted our time, because, even if this much of the bottom of this bird is under the water, the shot's ruined. Well, I rolled up my pants, water went straight down, but I made the plunge, and oh my gosh, I did this to get, come on, computer, this.
Wow.
Yes. Just spectacular. Yes. In fact, Steve Bowles said, I want a copy of that. He said, that is absolutely spectacular. I've been one more time since and caught it on, it actually kind of started cloudy, but you went one too far, didn't you? Is that the
That's
one?
the next one.
Oh, is it? Okay, sorry. I went one other time with Mark, the guy who got me to jump into this book, and that picture to the left,
Sorry.
it's okay. Between my scattered brain and the scattered computer.
I know, it's normally
You guys probably feel like
not
you're
this slow. There we go.
Okay, so the image to the left was on my the fourth trip that I made, and I took that with Mark. And the day started kind of cloudy, but with good luck, the clouds finally parted, and I was able to get it, as good as it possibly can be shown under dry conditions. I don't know if it's just me, but there's kind of a striking similarity between it and the Millstone's bluff bird. And again, this is just sort of to illustrate the vastness of these people were all over the place, and they covered a lot of ground, and they made their marks everywhere. As I plunged deeper into Missouri searching for petroglyphs, I'm forever indebted to a professional archaeologist who lives in St. Louis named Dr. Michael Fuller. He's actually the fellow who introduced me to Mark Leach. With his help, and again, as you talk to people, if you ever become that interested in seeing some of these images, as people come to know you and trust you and see what you're about, you can get information, and you can build a small network. And I have been lucky enough to get into his good graces, and he has shared some of these sites in Missouri. This is one such site that's on private land. A big problem with Missouri is the vast majority of their petroglyphs are on private land. But this is just an outstanding site. It's kind of, you could think of it like as a miniature Piney Creek ravine. It's 3 sites, all sort of close to each other, but technically separate. And that swallow-tailed bird to the left is, I lost my train of thought, is the only petroglyph on the boulder that it sits on, and it's the furthest from the other 2. And then these next 2 that she just kind of flashed through, these are actually from the site where they think it's possible that adolescent Cahokians traveled here, and performed sort of maybe a rite of passage. I kept it rated G. This one's kind of interesting because it's a thunderbird that they think, the thing near its beak, they think is a symbol of it vocalizing. Section 2, Natural Wonders. Who here loves frost flowers? It was about 2017 when I first sort of learned about these and stumbled on them.
Right. Stay there.
And now, the beautiful thing about these is they sprout from only a few plants. We're lucky to have at least 2 of them, wild oregano and yellow ironweed. Both of these are sprouting from wild oregano. But once you learn where you can find them anytime the conditions are right. So I go to the spot dependably, and every time when the conditions are right, there's frost flowers. Now, how eccentric and how cool they are is highly varied, but how many people here have actually seen frost flowers? And sort of everybody. Oh, wow. So you guys realize, like, the one on the left there, is I was photographing it. Towards the end of my photographing it, the heat from my breath started melting the tip. They're that delicate. Yeah, and I actually have a couple pictures, or at least one picture, where I take the photograph through the thin ribbon of ice.
We found some a few weeks ago that were the largest we'd ever seen. They came up to my waist almost.
The frost flowers?
Yes.
No.
Did you take pictures?
Yes, oh, yes.
Wow. The biggest one I've ever seen was probably this.
Crowned beard.
And it's in the book, I think.
Crowned beard.
I think it was crown beard was the plant. I've never.
It's a big leafed plant
Really?
with a big stem,
Huh.
fairly thick stem,
Uh-huh.
and it produces amazing.
Well, that's why we've never seen the other.
Sand
because
cave.
They were large.
Wow. Well, that's cool. All right, chapter 7, a little chapter just sort of introducing our places of Zen. We do have waterfalls, and I mean, depending on how you define a waterfall versus a chute versus just water running downhill, we have several hundred. But the vast majority of them are rain dependent, and most of them drain quickly, including this one, which is Double Falls, which can be found south of Giant City. Some are more dependable, like Bork Falls, or what's another dependable one? Yeah, Red Cedar Falls in Giant City is more dependable. And this happens to, if we would actually get more rain, this would be the beginning of the waterfall season.
Next week.
This is waterfall number 2 at Rocky Bluff. And to really see it in its full glory, you'll want to wear some rubber boots. You have to go a little bit off trail through this canyon to get to the base of it. And I mean, usually you can kind of skirt from side to side of the water-filled creek till you get to it, but I just love this thing. There's a little bridge that you get off, and as you're going through the canyon, you can hear it, and then you sort of round this corner, and then boom, there it is. And it's just, it's wonderful. Popular hikes. That shot of, go ahead and actually back that up. So I took this photograph 2 years ago, peak fall, and I thought the lighting on the rocks was just absolutely spectacular. And I mean, I just love how you can see the people just dappled across it. Just gives it such a wonderful sense of scale in addition to just the beautiful colors and, be still my heart. So the Shawnee National Forest and these hiking places are what Southern Illinois is, from an outdoors perspective, is best known for. Of course, there's tremendous photography potential, and this is what most photographers focus their attention on, myself included. In addition to the Shawnee National Forest, we also have several state parks, and I personally think some of them are the best in the Midwest. I mean, I think a lot of the features in this book show that Southern Illinois is one of the best places, at least in the Midwest. And in a lot of ways, I think it contends with the rest of the country. I mean, I'm going a little tangent here and tell a little story. So I had a patient several years ago who was from Vermont, and I was like, "Oh wow, you're from Vermont, beautiful colors, da 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 da." And he's like, "I like it better here." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Really?" The difference between here and so many places out east or out west is you can touch things here. Everywhere else, it's too big to feel like you're a part of it. It makes you feel small. This makes you feel like it wants to give you a hug. It's a more intimate experience. And I mean, I think he's right. I mean, these places, I could just, any nook and cranny, you can just explore for a day and not leave more than 10 feet. I mean, it's wonderful.
Sorry.
The area is highly underrated, which has its pluses and minuses. A good thing being solitude. And I'll let you in on a little secret of mine, and you guys may already know this. But if you want solitude, go during the week, go in the mornings. and go now. This is the off season. I actually don't do a whole lot of hiking during our peak season, and it's not because I'm against seeing people or anything. I just prefer the cold weather, and I prefer the leaves being down, and the being able to see the rock, and everything else that we all love. But don't tell the Chicagoans that. The last little tidbit here. So again, this has some good and bad points. Our national forest is highly fragmented. I mean, there's, you'll have a patch, and then it'll be landlocked by private land. And then you'll have roads crisscrossing through, all this forested area. Some people are kind of off-put by that, but what it does is it gives you an endless number of, it gives you boundless accessibility. It gives you 1,000 day trips that if you wanted to just camp and do the river to river and, stay in the forest for the long haul, you can, but this area is an ultimate for day trips. Hundreds. Little Grand Canyon. Yeah. One of the rare times I went when it was leaf out. But the steam, this is the view from atop Horseshoe Bluff. It is sort of, have you been there? It is a little bit south of Little Grand Canyon and several miles north of Inspiration Point, and you'll probably voucher it feels a lot like Inspiration Point in its grandeur. I mean, it's very remote. You either have to boat to it, or it's kind of a long 2-mile hike one way to get to it. And it's pretty featureless until you get to these two little spots where, there's an outcropping and it just opens to this. Nice little boardwalk at Giant City. Okay, historic graffiti, faces, and ruins. So I included this chapter because we do have some faces, and a teeny tiny amount of our graffiti does have historic value. That still doesn't excuse, what they did. But if it's old enough, or if it was made by Civil War soldiers, then I won't say it's forgivable, but it's something that you can look at with interest at least.
So
Yeah.
how is that different from the native people carving on the rocks?
So these people did not do this as any part of so this is not those people's homes, like the modern people's homes. These petroglyph sites you could liken to as modern day churches. So, I mean, they didn't build temples or structures. These are profoundly religious areas. It's not really clear what those people saw in these particular sites and why they, chose this site versus that to mark. But it's pretty ubiquitous that these are deeply ceremonial and sacred spots. In fact, they're some of the most sacred spots in Native American culture. So here on the left, we have one of those carvings left by Civil War soldiers. There are only 3 sites in Southern Illinois where Civil War soldiers left their marks. This one being Battery Rock, and this folk style flag just being really cool. There was an encampment that was present there, that was placed there so they could watch, for the Confederates across the river in Kentucky. They probably had a lot of downtime and carved their names in this flag into the stone wall. And I don't know, there's probably 10 or 15 names carved, and then this. The other site is along the top of Jackson Falls, and it was placed, I believe the fellow was out of the service by the time he made it, but he carved his name and his infantry and all that. And then the third site's at Giant City, but it's not currently viewable because it's up high and it's under a thick bed of moss. To the right, boy, Yeah, I mean, I'm taking the safe bet and saying it's historic, but nobody really knows for certain. I mean, there's a few people who sort of claim that they know the background behind this face and some of the others, but I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah. Aliens, yes.
Where is that one?
So that one is actually, it's here in Jackson County. It's over on the west side of the county, and you have to climb to get to it, which is kind of odd that why would someone go to that effort to make something that nice in a spot that I mean, unless someone shows it to you or you're real lucky, you're not going to find it. I mean, it's kind of a steep climb, and then you kind of have to turn onto this kind of precarious little ledge that's about 50 feet up. So, chapter 10, trees, another one of my favorite things, especially big trees. As I've said before, the book showcases big trees, state champions, and we even have one national champ. Well, it's a former national champion now. And we have the Cache River to thank for many of these big trees. Thank God it was inhospitable enough to not harvest from or log. This is the former national champion Shumard Oak. Occasionally, you'll see me in the book, and it's not out of vanity. I put myself there either for scale or because I just can't get out of the shot, as in the case with some of the fisheye shots, where I'm pointing straight up, and unless I just lay flat in a swamp, I'm not getting out of the way.
Fall down, or is there a bigger one?
Do what? Apparently they did find a bigger one in Kentucky. And at the time when this was a co-champion, there was another one that they were within a fraction of a point with how they calculate the tree sizes and the tree champions and all that. There was a second one. I can't remember where that one was located. But regardless, that's a spectacular tree.
It's a gorgeous tree.
Yeah, and it's on private property, so I mean, I'm there with the farmer. Do what?
I said it's on the driveway, so you.
Yeah, okay, so you've seen it. Yes. This is just a interesting view inside one of our ancient bald cypresses. I would put this tree at 1,000 to 1,200 years easily. And you could. Don't go.
Then it won't go back.
Or it's going to go too.
Yep, it is.
So I am of the opinion, and I wish there were a scientist who would take this on to verify it, but I think the Cache River houses the oldest trees in the Midwest, and by a margin. I mean, I've done my own research and have found my own anecdotal evidence. And based on that, the next oldest tree is 500 years minimum younger. I think that's something we need to celebrate. I mean, that's a pretty cool fact, I think. Beautiful flowers in Southern Illinois. Can anyone ID this? Bonus points. Bonus point time. Without looking in the book.
Seek.
Huh?
Yeah, when you see
Literally.
No clue? Copper iris, native. If you want to see this in bloom, the easiest way to do that is its bloom time is before blue flag, so early May. Go to the southern entrance that takes you to Snake Road, and about 3/4 of the way there, get out and just start walking up and down the road. And it will, the both sides of the road are typically water filled, and you'll see it in bloom all along there. And I mean, that's the way to do it. I mean, you can grow it in your own garden. I've got piles of it, but to see these in nature, that's something special.
Bourbon Lake too.
Yes, yeah. There's other places too, but close by here in Carbondale, I'd say the ones at Snake Road are about the closest that I know that would be easy to get to. Okay, so flowers abound in Southern Illinois, and every spring, several areas host wildflower displays, some of them being super hot spots in my view. In this book, I do highlight some rare species and a few species that actually may be kind of surprising to find in Illinois. There is one in here, I don't think I have a picture of it, but running buffalo clover. That's not it, you weren't supposed to click yet.
Oh,
Running buffalo clover, which is common in the plains. It grows in one place in Illinois in Jackson County. Yeah, kind of interesting. And it's a beautiful clover, I think. All right, go ahead. Nice picture of our native hyacinth. You can find this along, I know that Cave Creek Glade has been closed, but this grows along the base of it and where you park. So if you want to see this, you could go there, or it can be seen along Snake Road. Snake Road has a spectacular wildflower display every spring. One of the best. And it's early. It's an early bloom. Like everything just comes up early.
Why has the glade been closed?
I think they saw too much evidence of people deadheading the glade cone flower. So one bad apple spoils it for the whole bunch.
But it is a fragile, endangered site,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, they closed it because it probably needs to, so it can, if people deadhead all these, it won't regerminate, it won't reseed itself and it'll go away. So this is absolutely something that needs to be done for a while. As sad as.
Get permission, I think, if you have a reason.
Well, I don't, other than, unless photography is a reason.
You have to apply, I think, at the,
A Southern Illinois especial is French's shooting star. Well, let me ask again. How many of you guys have seen French's shooting star versus common shooting star?
Oh, well, I couldn't say it.
So French's shooting star is more diminutive, and the basal part of the plant, the shapes of the leaves are more rounded as compared to the common. The common, they're more kind of lanceolate shaped. The first population of this was described in the late 1800s by George Hazen French, a botanist at SIU. He discovered the population at Giant City, and that population is still there to this day. If you want to see a huge bloom of it, catch it in bloom at Panther's Den. And it's all along the trails. I mean, you don't even have to hunt for it. You walk right by it. It's wonderful. But he was the first to describe it scientifically, so that's why I call it an especial. Animals. Anybody willing to take a stab at ID? Snake. Yes, it is a snake. Eastern rat. Yep, you got it. And interestingly enough, I'm going to get up and get out of the camera. There's me.
Oh, wow.
That's the whole world in its eye. Yeah, like all that twisty tangliness, that is branching patterns of trees. That's not its iris or anything. That's actually just all reflection. Isn't that something? Yeah. Yeah. So in the book, I feature birds, reptiles, a swimming bobcat, and go ahead. The comeback of the mighty bald eagle. I guess I was lucky in that my photography took me to the right place at the right time when the population of bald eagles exploded, which has been about 5 years ago now. Now it's almost commonplace to see them. I mean, you see them here in town, but early on, I felt a small amount of pride in photo documenting their great comeback. So this is from that first year when I'm like, oh man, bald eagles, they've made a comeback. For people from my generation, growing up in the 80s, we learned about the bald eagle, but to me, it was kind of like just a mythical bird that our forefathers invented as a cool symbol to represent our nation. Something you never would actually get to see. I'm glad they've made the comeback. Southern Illinois also hosts a very lucky spot that a couple of whooping cranes, a mating pair of whooping cranes, overwinters. They're probably here now, and this area, it's mostly private, but there's lots of roads that you can kind of zigzag along. Lost my train of thought. This is their hunting ground. They roost somewhere away from this particular spot, but very dependably, there's about a 1 to 2 mile area that you can find them in. Oftentimes they may be, 500, 1,000 feet off, but I don't know if you're aware, this is the most endangered species of bird in North America. Estimates put their total numbers at about 500 to 800. Split between 2 flocks in the country. The bird only is a North American bird. It doesn't live anywhere else in the world. The flock here migrates from Wisconsin to Florida. It has about 85 to 100 members. The other flock goes from Canada to Texas. There are birders who will go a lifetime and never see a whooping crane. On this particular occasion, now all those markings and whatnot on their legs, that's all telemetry. Every single whooping crane that's alive is heavily monitored, and it's illegal to approach them, harass them, all this and that. But if they happen to wander near you, game on. That's what happened on this particular time I was watching. They wandered within 20 feet of me. I was in my truck, using it as a blind, and that was like winning the lottery. I mean, these not, in addition to being the most endangered, this is also the tallest bird in North America, and males stand at about 5'4" with a 9-foot wingspan. Yeah, I can't get in the shot to give you a sense of scale, so. All right, go ahead.
Do they have a rookery, like, up in the trees where there's lots of...
So their breeding
nests
grounds,
together?
their breeding grounds are in Wisconsin, and I don't know much of what that looks like. Yeah, those two just happen to make this particular little slice of Illinois their home for about the past 10 years now. Over each winter, and it's just a very lucky us because typically. To see one in Illinois, it's there for a day and then it's gone, or you just see it passing overhead. And that's assuming you're IDing it correctly, because a lot of people think, sandhill cranes, they mistake those for whooping cranes. But whooping cranes are pure white, sandhill are gray, and the whoopers are bigger. 2019, October, I made Illinois history. I kayaked to an archaeological site and with the intent of taking some photographs, so I had my good camera handy. On my way back, to make a long story short, I encountered this bobcat, this big Tom, I mean he was big, swimming across Cedar Lake. When I got home, and after my heart calmed down, not that I was worried that he was going to do anything, but just the excitement of an encounter like this, he swam a minimum of 1,200 feet. And when he hit the shore, 2 seconds, he was gone. I mean, an explosive power. This is the first photograph of a bobcat swimming taken in Illinois ever. Yes, the IDNR caught wind of it and verified it. I later got on Google and did a search, and indeed, between Canada and the US, there's maybe 20 documented occurrences of this. I mean, there's plenty of stories, but with video or camera, it's a rare sight. All right. As I said earlier, I included some flooding because look at the juxtaposition. Look at the interesting, and this is just a part of Southern Illinois life. I mean, how often do we worry about drought, flood, everything in between? And we're surrounded by more great rivers than probably anywhere else in the world. Us here in Southern Illinois. Chapter 14 jumps into kaolin clay and Anna pottery. I include this because in my view, this is one of the greatest cultural contributions that came from 19th century Southern Illinois. Nowadays, Anna pottery is highly revered. Many people consider it some of the finest folk pottery American folk pottery in existence. And I'll tell you, at auction, it commands an impressive premium. There was actually a frog mug that sold at an auction just a couple of weeks ago. This is a mug with a frog in it, $7,800. Yeah. So the pottery operated in Anna for most of I think it opened in 1859 and ran until just after the turn of the century, 1904 maybe, or something along those lines. Mostly what the pottery made was everyday wares. It's not marked. If you're real good at identifying Anna pottery, sometimes you can spot an unmarked piece, but it's pretty difficult. They set up in Anna for a couple of reasons. It's along the railroad route, which in those days was how they would, distribute. And geologic surveys suggested veins of high quality kaolin clay, a high grade of clay that, that they use. It's actually an ingredient in China. It took them a few years to find those veins, but when they did, or found at least part of the vein, they did very well with it. They had so much, and it was of such a high quality that they were able to sell it, use what they needed, and sell the excess to potters all around the country. With all of this success, they were able to make the brothers who opened the pottery, the Kirkpatrick brothers, were able to create their more eccentric pieces that they're more well known for. Snake jugs, pigs, frog mugs, things of this nature, even fair jugs. And these are the things that command big money. Earlier in the year, like I think it was in the spring, a piece of Anna pottery sold for the second highest price paid ever for a piece of American folk pottery at $600,000. That's pretty impressive. So something like that recently just sold for $7,800.
I've seen it on the Antique Roadshow auction.
Yeah.
They're very high.
Yeah. And in conclusion, a little bit of Illinois geology. Our most famous mineral, our state mineral, fluorite. It's beautiful. It's colorful. It has great industrial applications. It's fluoride that you get at the dentist, same stuff. And the best, highest prize pieces come from Illinois. Illinois fluorite, there are pieces again that sell for tens of thousands of dollars. And all mining operations are closed now. And all the mines, all the deposits are sort of related to a Higgs dome. I guess when it happened, it pushed up the ground enough that the fluorite that's normally thousands of feet deep now is, just a few hundred feet deep or whatever. One of the mines, I've been told, that was called Minerva, at the level of 800 feet is where the fluorite gold was. And I've seen some pieces and I've seen their price tags wow. In addition, Mississippians, notably from Kincaid Mounds, fashion fluorite into items of personal adornment and ceremonial use. And this concludes my talk. That's the book. That went a little longer than I was expecting.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, feel free if you have any burning questions. I won't give any locations away.
We already knew that. We did run into you at Piney, what was it, last year?
Yeah, I think so. You were there.
Yeah.
Your German Shepherd.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. And, the situation is just everything. It just, with petroglyphs, everyone exists at a slightly different orientation relative to the sun. So when you're at a site like Piney Creek, you have to spend so much time there because you don't know at what time the angle is going to just turn right to where this thing goes bing and just, shines. Another cool experience is, if you can't predict this, but if you could, going to these sites when it's cloudy and seeing how drab and, uninspiring they look under those conditions, and then the clouds part, and the sun happens to be in the right spot, and they appear from nowhere, and it'll give you goosebumps. It's a spiritual place.
That was my second or third time there when we ran into you, and you pointed out some that I had known.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd never, there's no way that we would ever.
Right.
see any
Well-
of the things that you pointed out to us. Because, we stand there and look at it and it's just
There.
Just rock. Just a rock.
Right. Well, and by the same token, a lot of people, will message me or whatever, send me pictures of things that they are curious about if it's something, and oftentimes it's not. These things play tricks on your minds. There's a term for it, and I'll butcher it if I try to say it, but it's kind of the same term as seeing images in clouds. It's part of it's ingrained in our DNA to try to recognize and find patterns in things. And
Do you know anything about the gravestone that's up above Piney?
gravestone? No. There's plenty of other prehistoric. Are you talking prehistoric?
No.
No. Oh, okay.
Well, but it was
It would be a modern,
old.
old, but modern times.
Historic. Yeah.
Just off the path as we.
And just one
Yeah, one.
by itself.
Huh. If I ever did another book and included historic stuff, woodland cemeteries would be a part of it. Before the establishment of the National Forest of 1939, a lot of these places were plowed and exposed. They were people's farms. So the number of woodland cemeteries is that there's many in Southern Illinois.
And if you ever do, Carol Crisp from Polk County has a series of, I don't know how many books. I've helped her locate some of those cemeteries, but she has them all recorded and what's written on the stones.
Oh my gosh,
dates.
that's as big an undertaking as doing this whole book.
Yeah, and that's just Polk County.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
You would find.
I know of probably 10 cemeteries just in the areas that I, frequent often.
Right.
But I've not seen it. There's plenty of other prehistoric, evidence of prehistoric remnants at Piney Creek outside of the petroglyphs, but I've not seen that tombstone. It's within the boundaries?
It's up above.
Yeah, and I've been, the trail takes you above.
Right.
Yeah.
We were
And trust me, I have climbed and scampered
And
and
I don't know, we were just kind of looking over that way and
Yeah,
Myra and I
there was
went over and I said, what is that over there? We
Well,
went
weren't there a couple of pink ribbons or something that almost looked like somebody had marked.
Maybe there was wire. Remember we found
Well,
wire?
it looks kind of homesteady, a couple of places up in there too, remember off the, I don't know.
For people who are keeping what they're saying. Maybe we should wrap up.
Okay. All right, well, if no one has any more questions, I guess if anyone wants to purchase a book or chit chat some more, but I think we're going to conclude the official, the screened version of this anyway.
Yes, thank you, Mike, so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.